Well, thank you for the introduction, and I'd like to start by thanking the audience for coming out this afternoon to listen to what I think will be a very interesting and fascinating and educational afternoon for you. This is the first time I've been to Mexico, and I'm already in love with this country. I love the food, I love the mountains, but most especially the people. You have been very warm and welcoming, and I want to say thank you for that. Also to send a special thank you to the President of Tech Milenio, Dr. Hector Escamilla, and the Director of the Institute of Happiness and Wellbeing, Dr. Enrique Tames, for the invitation to come all the way over from Australia to Mexico to speak to you about a very important topic, and that is the topic of positive education. And positive education is a field of science and practice that looks at how we can apply the principles and the science of positive psychology into schools, into kindergartens, into universities. And for me, it's a very fascinating field to be a part of, because we know that education is transforming, and the way in which we educate our young children is changing day by day. It's changing at a rapid pace, largely because of technology. So how we educate our young children is very different to how we were educated when we went through school. And technology has allowed a lot more information to be at the fingertips of our students. It's transformed classrooms. A lot of schools now are doing flip learning. So that means that the traditional learning is done at home via technology, and the homework and the experiential learning is now done in class. So there are a lot of different ways in which we are changing how we educate our young people. But as a psychologist, I'm more interested in the question of changing why we educate our young children. What is the purpose of a school? If you think of the school as an institution in our society, what purpose does that institution serve? Now, for many decades, we know that a key purpose of education is that it serves as an academic institution. So that is, schools are the places where our young children go to learn academic content, to learn skills that will help them succeed in the workplace. But over the last 2 decades, we've seen an expansion of the idea of what is the purpose of a school. And the field that I'm working in, positive education, also advocates that schools are not only academic institutions, but that they can also be well-being institutions. That schools can serve as an institution in society that systematically and intentionally builds the well-being of our young people. Large numbers of young people go through the social institution of a school, and they go to school from a young age until early adulthood, and they go to school 5 days a week. So we have this wonderful opportunity to expand the purpose of a school, to change or to add to this question why, to change why we're educating young people, so that it's not just about them learning academic knowledge. It's also about them graduating from school, having the skills to manage and take care of their own well-being. So the idea of positive education is to help schools expand their notion of why it is that we educate. We educate, A, to develop academic content and prepare these young people for the skills they need for the workforce. But in addition to that, we also deliberately teach well-being skills so that school becomes both an academic institution and a well-being institution. This is something that I feel very passionate about. But it's not just me. The idea of schools becoming a wellbeing institution, this is now a global conversation. And you can see in the slide behind me that the United Nations Conventions on the Rights of the Child talk about the importance of school, that education should seek not only to develop academic knowledge, but also to develop the child's personality and character. So this is coming from the United Nations. There are many important global organisations and associations who are also sending us the same message. We have a look here at UNESCO. In their policy document around education, they say that children across the world should universally learn about and learn in ways that develop their well-being. And then finally, if we go to the Organisation of Economic Cooperative Development, the OECD, this was a report that they released last year. And a specific quote is they say, perhaps the ultimate goal of education policy makers, teachers, and parents is to help children achieve the highest levels of well-being possible. So in all of our major global institutions now, there is this ongoing discussion about the idea that schools are not just there to teach math and humanities and geography, that schools also can play a role in teaching young children how to understand and manage their own well-being. Because long after we've left school and we've forgotten algorithms and we've forgotten physics and we've forgotten chemistry, we don't forget how to manage our well-being. So this is a legacy, a positive legacy that we can give to our young children. Now, in this OECD report that was published last year, they actually looked at the national curriculum statements of 37 different countries to look for evidence of the idea that at the national level, across these 37 different countries, were the governments taking this idea seriously? Were the governments saying that schools, in addition to being academic institutions, should also be wellbeing institutions? And what they found is that 72% of those countries had formally built into their national curriculum frameworks explicit teaching of wellbeing. When they broke that down a little bit further, they found that there were 3 sub-goals of wellbeing that these countries were specifically talking about. And you can see up on the slide there that the 3 categories, the first category was looking at explicitly teaching our students how to set and achieve goals. 67.5% of the countries in their national curriculum frameworks had that built in as an explicit goal. The second goal that we looked at was working with others. So you can see up on the slide here, deliberately teaching the skills of sociability, deliberately fostering an environment in the school that creates respect and caring for other people. So not just leaving these as a byproduct, not just saying that if we create a good learning environment, by default, that will create students who know how to set goals, that will create students who know how to be sociable. Not leaving it as an afterthought, deliberately bringing it in as an explicit statement in the national curriculum. That was 70% of the schools. And the third goal was deliberately teaching students how to better manage their emotions. You can see here that, again, a large number of those countries said this is something that we intentionally and deliberately want to teach to our young children. So this idea of schools not only being an academic institution, but also being an institution that can build the well-being of a young person. That by the time they graduate from school, they are a resilient, robust young person or young adult by that stage who goes out into the workforce not only with academic knowledge but with well-being knowledge as well. When we talk about how it is that we bring wellbeing into the schools, then my specific focus is on a particular area of wellbeing, and that's the area of positive psychology. And the good news for schools who are starting to incorporate wellbeing into their schools is that there is now a very robust and large body of science that can be used to help support schools and teachers and parents and school administrators to reach that goal, to create a wellbeing institution in their school. And so I want to share with you a little bit of what what the broad field of positive psychology looks like. And what I'm going to share with you is some research that was conducted by myself and one of my PhD students, Ruben Rusk, a few years ago. We were interested in looking at, is the science of positive psychology growing? Because certainly the interest in positive psychology is growing, and this is a beautiful example of how public interest in this area is growing. But I am a researcher at heart and I'm a scientist, and so I really wanted to find out, not just is the interest growing in the field, but is the science itself growing and expanding? And so together with my PhD student, we contacted Thomson Reuters. Thomson Reuters are the largest publishing house in the world. They're based in Pennsylvania, and they keep the library of every single psychology scientific journal in the world. There are 700 psychology journals in the world, and Thomson Reuters keep the library of every single peer-reviewed scientific paper that is published in those 700 journals. We contacted this publishing company and we asked them, could you please give us your data of all of the peer-reviewed psychology journal articles that have been published over the last 2 decades, because we want to examine whether within that very large library, the science of positive psychology is growing. They gave us access to their database from 1992 until 2010. They gave us the biggest data file you can ever imagine. There were 1.8 million peer-reviewed journal articles in that data set. So Ruben and I hand-coded, no, only joking. We didn't hand-code 1.8 million journal articles. We developed an algorithm to be able to go into that data set and pull out which of those particular articles were focused on the science of positive psychology. Which of those articles were looking at what is good about human nature, what is right about human nature and how we amplify it. Which of those psychologists, such as myself, have studied the benefits of positive emotions, the benefits of positive relationships, the benefits of having a sense of meaning and purpose and accomplishment. And we were able to pull those articles out. The first thing that we did was we analysed the types of topics that are being studied in the field of positive psychology. And you can see behind me, this is a Wordle. And what the Wordle does is it pulls together all of the topics in those 1.8 million journal articles. And the bigger the word, the more that topic had been studied. So I don't know about you, and maybe it says something about me because I am a scientist and I'm a bit of a nerd in that way, but when I look at this slide, it makes me feel happy. I actually downloaded this slide and I put it up on my fridge at home because it made me feel happy that there were scientists all across the world who were scientifically studying the good qualities in human nature. Before I moved into the field of positive psychology, I had 10 years as a researcher, as a psychology researcher, and my days were filled with studying stress, bullying, toxic leadership, workaholism, burnout. So I was surrounding myself with negative phenomena every day. And so this particular slide always makes me feel happy that I know that I'm part of a community now who are seeking to scientifically understand what promotes happiness, what promotes self-efficacy, what promotes engagement, what promotes meaning. Because if we can understand the elements that create these positive conditions, we can bring those elements into schools, we can bring those elements into families, we can bring those elements into workplaces. So this was the first thing we found in that analysis. The second thing we did was look at, well, is the science growing? And you can see here that we track the science, and it's absolutely growing from 1992 through until 2010, which was the database that the publishing company gave us. Over that time period, the science grew by 410%. It is the fastest growing subfield of psychology. And there are many subfields of psychology. So we have positive psychology, we have clinical psychology, neuroclinical psychology, developmental psychology, educational psychology, sports psychology, performance psychology, music psychology, neuropsychology, and I could keep going. So the point is that there are many different subfields within the overarching field of psychology, and positive psychology is one of those subfields, but it also happens to be the fastest growing subfield of science. That, to me, was music to my ears, to know that I'm not only contributing in a positive way, but I'm part of a growing field of science. And it also comes back to the idea of schools being wellbeing institutions, because there is a lot of science now to support you as a school in taking that journey. It needs to be said that it is easy to have such a large percentage increase when you start at such a low baseline. So back in 1992, only 1% of psychological researchers were studying our positive qualities. 99% of psychological researchers were studying either neutral or negative qualities. So it is easy to get such a large percentage increase when you've only got, when you start at such a low baseline. But you can see the curve, you can see the trajectory. It's definitely going up. It's not plateauing. So it's a fast-growing field of science. It's also a field of science that is spreading. So this was the other analysis we did in the paper. You don't need to know too much detail about this slide, but it's a network map. And so what we were able to do with this very large database is have a look at where are positive psychology topics being studied in different fields. So what you see is the bigger the circle, the higher the concentration of scientific peer-reviewed publications. So not surprisingly, in the centre you see a lot of psychology disciplines. But if you look up the very top, you'll see the field of neurosciences. So neuroscientists are now studying what does your brain look like when it's happy, when it's contented, when it feels a sense of compassion or empathy. If you go down the other slide here, you'll see that positive psychology is making its way into public health. It's making its way into social sciences. It's making its way into sports sciences. Down the bottom here, you'll see that it's making its way into management and organisations, which is what you're going to hear a lot about tomorrow if you're attending tomorrow. But for our purposes, what we found in this analysis is that the science of positive psychology is making its way into education. And so, again, you are well supported by science if you are taking this journey. Now, back in 2009, Professor Martin Seligman put forward a very important paper on this topic of positive education. And he put forward 3 key reasons for why it is that we should teach the science of positive psychology to our students in schools. He said the first reason is that it can act as an antidote to depression. And there's a lot of science now to support that, in addition to traditional therapies that seek to reduce the symptoms of depression. If we combine those therapies with positive psychology techniques, with teaching patients how to understand and use their character strengths, with teaching depressed patients how to experience more gratitude and how to reach out and get social support. When we couple traditional therapies for depression and we add to that positive psychology techniques, it turns out that you have a much higher success rate in getting rid of depression. And not only that, that the symptoms of depression stay away for longer. So the first reason that Professor Seligman put forward for why we should teach positive psychology in schools is as an antidote to depression. And we all know that actually a global crisis is happening in terms of youth mental illness, that depression is at unprecedented levels in our young people in many countries across the world. The second reason that he put forward is to say, well, it's not just about helping with a negative state, that if we teach the skills of positive psychology in schools, it also helps to enhance positive states. So it can be a pathway to life satisfaction for young people. And then the third argument that he put forward, which is also a very important argument, is the idea that it boosts their capacity for learning and creativity. And Barbara Fredrickson's work from the US shows very convincingly that the way we feel influences the way that we think. And that when we feel positive emotions like curiosity and interest and wonder and awe and kindness and compassion, when we feel elevated through positive emotions, that changes the way we think. And it changes the way we think for the better. So when we feel good, we function well. So when students come into a classroom, whether you know it or not, the first thing that they're doing is they're reading the emotional climate of the classroom. And if it's an uplifting, engaging emotional climate, that creates a positive emotional state in them. And when they feel good, they function well. When they have positive emotions, they think more widely, they think more clearly, they're more creative in their thinking, they engage in more effective problem solving. All the basic academic skills that we want in a classroom. And you can get those skills through fantastic curriculum, through great technology, through well thought out lesson plans. But if you don't have a positive emotional state that goes with it, you're closing the student down for the reason that they're there, the academic learning. So these are the three key reasons that Professor Martin Seligman put forward for why it is that we should start to introduce the science of positive psychology into schools. So it comes back to this idea that today schools shouldn't just be seen as academic institutions, but we should also be recognising that they have a dual purpose. That as an institution in society, schools function to enhance the academic knowledge of our young people, but they also serve the purpose to enhance the well-being of our young people. Now, the good news is that those two purposes support each other. And so what the research is telling us is that when we deliberately engage in building the well-being of our students, they do better academically. And I want to share some of that research with you now. So this is a large-scale meta-analysis that brought together, as you can see, 213 studies that had looked at this question: what is the link between a student's well-being and their academic performance? So the first thing to note about this meta-analysis is that there are 213 studies that have been published that have scientifically asked this question. And actually, I've just recently written a chapter for a new book that's coming out next year called Advances in Positive Psychology. And I wrote the chapter on positive education. And I've extended the search. I was able to find 280 peer-reviewed, published scientific journal articles that have looked at this relationship. And by and large, what those researchers are finding is that there's a positive link between the well-being of the student and the academic performance of the student. So what we see here in this large meta-analysis was that when students go through wellbeing programs at school, on average, they do better academically to the tune of 11%. So I don't know about you, but I have two children who are both at school, a son who's in high school and a daughter who is in primary school. If they get an 11% bonus on their grades because their school is taking care of their well-being, I'm pretty happy with that. So this is compelling evidence to show that when we take care of the well-being of a student, we also enhance their likelihood of academic success. It's important to say in this scientific study that the researchers did take into account all of the known factors that influence academic achievement. So they did take into account the type of school. They took into account the socioeconomic status of the student. They took into account the educational levels of the parents. All of the things that we already know are factors that predict academic achievement. Those things were all included in the analysis, and then they were put to the side. And the researchers said, okay, holding all of those things constant, if these students had a school that taught a wellbeing program, did they do better academically? And the answer is yes. 11% better in terms of their achievement tests. Now, the next study I want to show you comes from my country in Australia. We have a national testing plan, it's called NAPLAN, where we test the literacy and numeracy abilities of our students nationally. So every single student who's in 3rd grade, 5th grade, 7th grade and 9th grade goes through this national testing, so we can test their their ability in maths and numeracy, and we can test their ability to read and write, their literacy. And in this study, the researchers looked at 96 schools, all of whom had implemented a wellbeing program, some of whom had implemented the wellbeing program very successfully, very effectively, stuck to every element of the science of the wellbeing program, and then other schools who had sort of said, yeah, you know, we're kind of doing wellbeing, we've got this program, we're maybe doing one or two of the lessons, we've trained maybe one or two of the teachers. So we're sort of doing wellbeing, but not really to the extent that the program has suggested. And what the researchers found is that the schools who implemented the wellbeing program, but did it in a high quality and very sort of rigorous and consistent way, those students were 6 months ahead on the literacy and numeracy results. So those students had 6 months further of learning than the other schools, simply as a result of taking care of the wellbeing of their students. So there's a very strong academic argument for why it is that taking care of the wellbeing of a student also supports that first purpose. It helps the schools to be an academic institution. But I also have to say that I'm a psychologist, and yes, I'm absolutely interested in the academic results of the students who go to school, but I think that wellbeing in and of itself is an important endpoint. I think we have a moral obligation when we take charge of a young person and they come into our care in a schooling environment, that we're also looking at wellbeing as an endpoint in and of itself, that it's not always about grades and it's not always about academic achievement, and that if a young person leaves your school having resilience, knowing how to manage their emotions, having good social skills, knowing how to set goals and work with others, that's success. You've achieved success. So wellbeing is an important endpoint in and of itself. And I want to share with you some more of my research that's looked at this question. If we do implement wellbeing, we know that it improves academic achievement, but if we implement positive psychology practices into schools, does it work? In the sense of, does it actually build the wellbeing of a young person? And so this was another large-scale review that I did. You can see here over 3,000 students were involved in this study from a range of different countries. And the design of the studies was an intervention design. So that means that what we did was we took one group of students and we put them through some positive psychology programs. And we took another group of students who were the comparison group, who just went through school as usual. We tested the wellbeing of both groups before we started the program, and then we tested the wellbeing of both groups at the end. And if it turns out that the group of students who went through the wellbeing program had higher levels of wellbeing at the end, that gives us more confidence that it was as a result of the program, rather than just some sort of developmental spurt or the fact that they had an amazing teacher. So all of the studies that made it into this review were intervention design. These were the types of programs that were being taught in the schools that were part of this study. So they're all about how do we cultivate positive states. They were programs that specifically taught students how to enhance their levels of hope, how to enhance their levels of gratitude, how to have more serenity, more calmness, how to become more resilient and bounce back from life's challenges and adversities, and finally, how to know what your character strengths are and use your character strengths. So this was the focus of the programs, and this was the findings of the review study. Students who went through these programs had better wellbeing. That's the bottom line. When you put these programs in place and you work with young people who have amazing minds who absorb everything, and you give them the gift of teaching them explicitly about how they can have more hope, you give them empowerment about how they can have more gratitude, how they can have more serenity, how they can have more resilience. It turns out that they say, as a result of that, they have higher life satisfaction, they have higher self-esteem, they have higher self-acceptance. That one always jumps out at me. I think, well, I'm 45, and I can honestly share with you that I'm only just starting to get to a point of having self-acceptance, of of saying to myself, these are my strengths, these are my weaknesses, I accept who I am, I'm still a good person. I think it's such a gift to give a 15-year-old self-acceptance and to do it intentionally instead of, we all kind of get there at certain ages based on trial and error and what life throws at us. We didn't learn that we could take control of that process. Students also reported high levels of relationship satisfaction and a higher sense of optimism as a result of going through these wellbeing programs. But here was what I think is an interesting finding. The programs themselves were designed to enhance wellbeing, and you can see from this slide that they were effective. They did enhance the wellbeing of the students, but they did more than that. And this is what the students also said, that as a result of going through these positive psychology programs at school, yes, I feel better, I have higher levels of hope and optimism, I have higher levels of self-acceptance and relationship satisfaction, but not only that, I'm actually engaging with school more. I find school more interesting. I feel the question, I feel good at school, that went up after the program compared to before. It didn't change in the students who just went through school as usual. So there's this really lovely kind of byproduct of enhancing wellbeing, which is that you're enhancing the students' connection with the school. You're making them feel more engaged, which could be an explanatory reason for the earlier results, that when students feel good, they do better academically because they're engaging more with the school. So I want to share with you a new program that I have recently developed with one of my past master's students. We run a Masters of Applied Positive Psychology at the University of Melbourne. Layla McGregor and I have put together a new program. It's a small program, it's only 5 lessons, and we're calling it the Positive Detective Program. It's based on my TED Talk. I gave a TED Talk last year, and the essence of my TED Talk, what I did in my TED Talk was try to convince the audience why they should no longer watch the nightly news. That the nightly news shows us the worst of humankind. It shows us greed, it shows us violence, it shows us corruption, it shows us selfishness. But that is a very small slice of humankind. That actually the bulk of us on a day-to-day basis are good-hearted people who are trying to do good things in the world. That's why we refer to ourselves as a humankind, because by nature we are kind. But the news doesn't show us. The news is not a balanced representation of human nature. And so what I said in my TED Talk was that we're never going to change the big media corporations. They're always going to operate on the idea that bad news sells. And that's what they're going to show us. But we have a new form of media now, and that is social media. And that's not owned by the big news corporations. We control social media. So in the TED Talk, what I suggested was that we each become positive detectives, and that we use social media as a way of sharing good news stories to counteract what we're seeing in the big media corporations, to go out and to become a positive detective, to deliberately look for positive qualities in other people. And when you see people acting with courage or with amazing leadership or with kindness or having a great sense of sort of justice and fairness on the sports field, to share those qualities using social media. So that was the idea behind the TED Talk, and then that idea evolved into this school program we're calling it the Positive Detective Program, and that is to help teach students how to become positive detectives, how to teach them how to look for positive qualities in their peers, in their teachers, in their parents, in their family, in their community. Not only see it, but then share those stories. Because this is a really important part of us having a sense of hope. And hope isn't just a positive emotion that makes us feel good. It's a critical emotion that determines our action. Hope puts us into action. And it creates actions that allow for a better future. So it's really critical that as a society, and particularly for our young people, that they have a sense of hope. And what the research shows is you are more likely to have a sense of hope when you see good qualities in other people. So the Positive Detective program, we launched it 2 months ago. You can see this is our Positive Detective dog, Sherlock. And Sherlock's already in a whole bunch of countries. You can see down the bottom, there are schools in Australia, New Zealand, China, US, Hong Kong, Singapore, Mexico. We have some schools in Mexico, and we are in the process of translating Positive Detective into Spanish. And that will be done by the 1st of December so that more schools in your country can use the program. I'm really delighted to have a partnership with the 28 high schools at Tech Millennium who will be using the Positive Detective program in a couple of months' time. Canada, there are schools in Canada who are using this. Finland, there are some schools in Finland. Since I did this slide a few weeks ago, we also now have some schools in Indonesia and the UK who are using this program. So this for me feels, it makes me feel very happy that I can take some science and sort of start a bit of a positive ripple in countries that I've never even visited in. And the schools in these countries are sending us photographs of grade 4 kids with their big Sherlock Holmes magnifying glass posters where the kids are saying, these are the positive things that I saw this week. These are the positive qualities. One of the schools did it specifically for the teachers, so they had a whole focus on students spotting the positive qualities in the teachers, and then that went up on this school has electronic monitor boards. So as you're walking through the school hallways, normally it has school announcements, you know, turn up to school on time, don't forget this, don't forget that. But for this week, they didn't have announcements. They just had all the, Mr. Johns, and then the student said, I saw the positive quality of fairness, or I saw this teacher's creativity, or love of learning, or sense of compassion, or helpfulness. So it was just a beautiful, very simple way of being a positive detective and starting to change the culture of a school through this program. We have developed this program for early learning years, so the kindergarten years. We've also developed the program for the primary school years, for the high school years, and we developed a program for the teachers as well. So you can be a positive detective in the staff room and not just in the classroom. Every single one of these programs comes with curriculum, comes with lesson plans and a whole bunch of resources. So if you're interested, please feel free to visit the Positive Detective website, positivedetective.com, and as I said, by the 1st of January, the program will be translated into Spanish. We have resources for the primary, resources for the secondary. Now, I have to tell you that when we first developed this program, our focus was on the students. We sent it out to a bunch of teachers who we knew, various countries across the world, and said, please give us your feedback about this program. How do we make it better and get it ready for schools? We got lots of great feedback from the teachers, but one of the common threads of feedback that we got from the teachers was, why are you only making this program for the students? Because actually we need it too. And one of the teachers sent me this fantastic visual, which I want to share with you. It says, if you don't feed the teachers, they eat the students. So we said, yeah, let's make a positive detective program for the teachers. And so we have one for teachers as well. It's 5 professional development sessions that someone in the school can run on behalf of the teachers to help the teachers see and share positive qualities that are happening across the school. And I want to end on that point. I think that it's very important that we do take care of the well-being of the adults who work in schools, not just the teachers, but the administration staff, the IT staff, the caterers, the ground staff, every single member of that school, if it is a wellbeing institution, should have their wellbeing built as a result of being part of that school. And so the same 3 reasons that Professor Martin Seligman gave for giving positive education to students, also we need that for teachers. It's an aid to reducing depression, it's an aid to enhancing life satisfaction, and it's an aid to enhancing learning and creativity, which every teacher knows they need in the classroom. I want to finish just by giving you 2 examples of some research that is about positive psychology for teachers in schools, not students. And this is based on the idea of the flow-on effect, that when we take care of the well-being of the adults in the school, that flows on to the well-being of the students in the school. So another study of mine where we looked at, we worked with school principals for a month, and we asked them to engage in 2 gratitude practices. The first was to keep a gratitude journal for a week, and we asked them at the end of every day, when you get home from school, please write the good things that happened in your school that day, the things that you feel grateful for in your school. And the second thing we asked them to do was to write a gratitude letter to someone else that they worked with in the school to thank that person and acknowledge that person for their role. We then left those principals for a month, and then we asked them to write about your experiences, and we content analysed the principals' experiences. This is what we found, that the principals who engaged in these positive psychology practices said that as a result of introducing gratitude into their leadership, they had a feeling of relief, this feeling of catharsis, that like a weight had been lifted off their shoulders, that they could bring gratitude and emotions into the workplace. They said that it expanded their perspective of the school, that they weren't going home every night just thinking of the problems that needed to be fixed. But in addition to that, they were thinking, yes, there are these problems, but all of these good things are also happening at school. They talked about how it created connection to their staff members, because a lot of them started bringing gratitude into the workplace. But they also said that it made them feel a little bit vulnerable, that it wasn't always a positive emotion, that sometimes expressing gratitude to someone else made them feel a little bit uncomfortable. And that's an important point to say about all of positive psychology. It's not a cure-all, and it's not always positive. As with anything, you have to use the right practice in the right context for the right time. So gratitude doesn't always work, but what the school principals found is that yes, generally it worked. I'll leave you with these quotes. One principal said, "The gratitude letter almost felt like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. And this was unexpected because that was a feeling that I would have normally associated with a release of guilt." Another one says, "Practicing gratitude has left me with an incredible sense of relief, of calmness, and of spirituality." So they felt very replenished to go back into their role. Gratitude expands your perspective. So I still tackle all the problems at school, but I know that there are a lot of good things that are also happening. I just want to end with this example. So this was one of the principals. After she had done her gratitude diary and written her letter, she really decided to bring gratitude into the staff room as a cultural practice. So she came in on a Sunday, and this was the notice board of the staff room. She took down all of the notices, and she just put up the signed gratitude board, and she just wrote one little gratitude note in the corner. And the next day, it was a Monday, it was the staff meeting. She didn't say anything to the staff. She didn't say, "This is my new practice, this is my new initiative." She just left it to see what the staff would do. And over the course of the next 2 weeks, she took photographs of the gratitude board. So this was the first morning. This is what the gratitude board looked like by the end of the first week at the school. And this wasn't a leader saying, "You now have to be grateful." This was just her providing the opportunity for staff about how to be grateful. And she told me that that one simple positive psychology practice made a huge difference to the culture of the staff room. She said that before that, the culture was very negative, that the staff would come in and they would complain about students and they would complain about workload. But when she introduced the gratitude board, they had a broader perspective. So it didn't mean that they didn't complain about those things, because those things are real and we need to acknowledge them. But they started to become positive detectives. They started to look more intentionally for the good things that were happening in the school. She also said she found that every time there was a new one, people would stop. They would want to read what was good, what was happening around the school that was good. And that initially, the gratitude post-its were very much one person thanking another. So one teacher saying, thank you for taking my yard duty, or thank you for looking after my students while I had to go and take a phone call. But over time, the staff started to expand what they felt grateful for. So it didn't have to rely on someone else's action. The post-it notes were things like, I'm grateful for the smell of coffee when I walk into the staff room, or I'm grateful to hear students laugh when they're playing at lunchtime. When I visited the school recently, there was a post-it note that said, I'm grateful for driving into work today and hearing the 1980s song Thriller by Michael Jackson. So just the more that we practice looking for the good, noticing and appreciating the good, the easier it becomes. And this simple practice of gratitude makes a really big difference to a school. So that is where I want to end. Again, thank you so much for, well, we're talking about gratitude, so I want to say thank you so much for having me. I hope that my presentation has been of value to you, that you can go back and have conversations with the people that you need to have conversations with and say, there's a really big body of science behind this. There is scientific evidence to show that when we take care of the well-being, we enhance learning, we enhance academic achievement. And there is scientific evidence to show that these wellbeing programs do work, not only for the students, but also for the staff. Thank you.